Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. Christ, not Caesar, is the head of the church. This is Wretched Radio. Why the bot-like reading? I'll explain that in a bit, but first, let's dive deep into the contents of an article written by Dr. John MacArthur titled, Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. He deals with the issue of a government that tries to open up the front door of a church to invite itself in. What is the response of the church? What should a pastor do? How should we Christians be responding when the government gets involved in church affairs? I think Dr. MacArthur summarizes it as well as anybody can, and it will help you and your church to navigate through these choppy waters. Give or take 15 years ago, Rick Appleton, do you remember Brainiac? I believe he's a Presbyterian pastor now. Super whip-smart dude. Worked at the ministry, and I could be wrong about this, but I think we were traveling through Europe doing Living Waters season, Way of the Master season 4. And Rick introduced me to a concept of jurisdictional authority. That God has established realms, and each one has a limited authority, because that's how the Bible represents government, family, and church. And we need to keep jurisdictional authority in view even as we look at Romans 13. Dr. MacArthur said this, insofar as government authorities do not attempt to assert ecclesiastical church authority or issue orders that forbid or our obedience to God's law, their authority is to be obeyed, whether we agree with their rulings or not. In other words, writes MacArthur, Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 still bind the consciences of individual Christians. We are to obey our civil authorities as powers that God himself has ordained. Now, many people, they would stop right there. That would be wrong. The Bible has another word to speak about the church, about the government, about the family, what their roles and limitations are. So Dr. MacArthur continues, God has established these institutions, and each one has a sphere of authority with jurisdictional limits that must be respected. And he now gives some examples. A father's authority is limited to his own family. So, Dad, you've got some authority, but it's you and your family. Nobody else's family, by the way, and not the government, and not the church. God limits your authority. Church leaders' authority, delegated to them by Christ, is limited to church matters. That also limits a pastor or board of elders' involvement in civil affairs, and even to a degree, rightly understood, and there's a gazillion scenarios, familial affairs. If it is a spiritual issue, yes. When it leaves that realm, it starts, better think it through long and hard. Do I have jurisdiction regarding this issue in that realm of authority? These aren't easy issues. Government is specifically tasked with the oversight and protection of civic peace and well-being within the boundaries of a nation or community. God has not granted civic rulers authority over the doctrine, practice, or polity of the church. It's not their jurisdiction. The biblical framework limits the authority of each institution to its specific jurisdiction. Now, let's reread our headline, because here's what you got. You got some tension, and I think a fair amount of Christians are struggling with how to harmonize this tension, because one feels passive and weak and un-American. The other makes us sound like we are revolutionaries. Here's the headline, read two different ways. Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. That's one way to read it. Here's another way to read it. Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. You feel the difference, don't you? And I think that we need to be more of the former and less of the latter. Why? Because we're not revolutionaries. We're not defiers. We're not rebellers. If you take the time to go Merriam-Webster, those three words, defy, resist, rebel, they all have a component of fight. They all have a component of put 'em up, government, I'm coming at you. We're the opposition. Nope. Romans 13 says, you're the good citizens. But realms of jurisdictional authority say we don't have to do everything that we're told by a government, whether we agree with it or not, because they do not have the authority by God to enter into this realm. And it is our job to defend that realm. Why? Because God has ordained it. We are the pillar, the foundation of the truth. And if the government intrudes, tries to redefine truth, tries to redefine how we do worship, even polity. It's interesting, MacArthur said that. And when I say MacArthur, I mean Dr. MacArthur, sir. Doctrine, practice, or polity. So when the church enters in, oh, sorry, we can't do that. But it's not, put 'em up, put 'em up. That's, I think, the balance that needs to be considered. And perhaps, maybe, just maybe, phraseology is super important. You see this all the time, the abortion, remangling of words, definitions, genders, sexuality, all of those terms, they're redefined and you don't really know what they mean, and it helps win the argument because there's power in how we present an issue. And so when we use words like resist, defy, oppose, revolt, it assumes a posture of aggression. And according to Romans 13, that's not our posture, but that doesn't mean that we let them into the place where they don't belong. That is our balance. And I think that if we would maybe just choose our words wiselier, that's right. That's kind of ironic. Choose our words wiselier, we would say something like this. We submit to the government unless they command us to sin, forbid us from obeying a command, or they enter into the ecclesiastical realm without authority with a desire to affect doctrine, polity, and practice of the church. That's different than we need to defy the government. We need to rebel. We need to resist. We need to revolt. It's different. And I don't think we lose anything except our testimony if we don't, I think, adopt a phrasing that says, oh, no, we're grateful for government. In this instance, with what they're trying to do inside of our church, we obey Christ, and it's his realm, and he reigns there, and we are the defenders of the truth, which is contained inside of the church. And so we have to, unfortunately, say no to the government. That is, I think, finding the correct phraseology, balance, and emphasis that combines jurisdictional authority and Romans 13. MacArthur continues, the church does not have the right to meddle in the affairs of individual families and ignore parental authority. Parents do not have authority to manage civil matters. Similarly, government officials have no right to intervene in ecclesiastical matters in a way that undermines or disregards the God-given authority of pastors and elders. There it is. I don't know that the whole biblical presentation on the Christian posture toward government could be any more pithier list than that. Said another way, it has never been the prerogative of civil government to order, modify, forbid, or mandate worship. When, how, and how often the church worships is not subject to Caesar. Caesar himself is subject to God. Now, we want to understand that rightly, because that can be taken to an extreme too, but that is everybody answers to God, everybody. Jesus affirmed that principle when he told Pilate, you would have no authority over me unless it was given to you from above. And because Christ is the head of the church, ecclesiastical matters pertain to his kingdom, not Caesar's. And Jesus draws a stark distinction between those two kingdoms when he said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and render unto God that which is God's. He never offered to Caesar what belongs solely to God. The honor that we rightly owe our earthly governors and magistrates, Romans 13:7, does not include compliance when such officials attempt to subvert sound doctrine, corrupt biblical authority, exercise ecclesiastical authority, or supplant Christ as head of the church in any other way. That we should memorize that sentence right there, because that is a whole lot different than going, it's time for us to stand up against the government. No, it's not. It's time for us to defend the pillar and foundation of the church, because Christ is head of the church. And we will not be revolters, revolutionaries, resistors, defiers, rebellers. No, we are a law-abiding people who abides chiefly by the laws of Jesus Christ. And we harmonize his commands in Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 to be submissive while recognizing jurisdictional authorities. With those two rightly married, that is how the church should be living in a strange government in a strange new land. Until tomorrow, go serve your king. You're just watching a one segment from the 4 segments that we do every single day on Wretched Radio. If you'd like to watch the whole shebang, you can do so at wretched.org. Oh, don't worry. Your cake is going to be ready for your baby shower. Just putting the finishing touches on it now. Perfect. Yes, ma'am. You can pick it up at noon. It's just...